Okay, so the main theme of this video is going to be race and gender baiting. At least that's how I see it. People are free to disagree. Firstly, before I continue with this, a quick few words I should say about my last video why I believe Hillary Clinton lost the election. There were a few things that I negated to say. One of the most important things is Bernie Sanders. What I mean by that is that the allegations of corruption within the democratic election process to the detriment of Mr. Sanders. And the very vocal base that he has, I think, went against Clinton because for some hardcore Bernie Sanders supporters, they trust Hillary Clinton um, about as much as they trust Donald Trump. They really see them as two sides of the same coin. So I think that factor, when history comes to be written, will also be weighed in. Would Bernie have beaten Trump? To be honest, I can't see that really. I think Bernie would have energized his base. I think he would have done very well with his base. But how is Bernie ever going to reach out to I don't know, gun owners in the Midwest? He in that sense would have had possibly even bigger problems than Hillary. So that's just an example, by the way. So yeah, when history comes to be written, I think there's a variety of reasons. Anyway, main point of this video. So the BBC's just had one of these little graphic videos where they say the title of the video is "Why, if you're black, you're much less likely to become prime minister in the United Kingdom of the United Kingdom." Um, and then they go on to talk about disadvantaged backgrounds and so on, and they have this little graphic to explain that. Firstly, it is factually true you're less likely to become prime minister of this country if you're black. But there is one important point to that. The majority of the population is white. Now, that's not a racist statement, it's simply a statement of fact. So, what are the chances of a white person becoming president of Kenya or president of Zambia? Um, Actually, I believe there was a southern African country that had a white president. I'm talking in the post apartheid years. I'm not sure which country it was, Botswana or there was somewhere recently. But the point is, why is there this unique pressure on Western countries to constantly have to show that they're egalitarian by saying, you know, a minority can rise to the highest level? The point is, we have laws in place against discrimination, and I support those laws. They should be in place. I don't think someone should be told you're not allowed to do this because you're black or you're Chinese or you're a woman. So it is right that those laws are in place, but that shows that the legal basis is egalitarian. Now people will say, "Oh, but opportunity isn't just about the legal side of things; it's about a wide range of things, such as deprivation." Okay, let's take that argument. The black community maybe face a higher proportion of deprivation, but that ignores the fact that in many northern English cities, there is pockets of real deprivation among the white population as well, and in parts of the south. So what I take issue with, I don't decry the media for reporting facts, but I do think that they do select what they report. And I think that both CNN and the BBC are guilty of constantly playing up the victimhood agenda. What I mean by that, I mean that when they're addressing any story pretty much to do with ethnic minority people or women, it is in the context of you're a victim and your oppressors are the wicked white patriarchy. That's pretty much it. And firstly, it's incredibly misleading because it totally negates a legal basis. Also, it negates the fact that in the case of the gender argument, there's some fields that are actually dominated by women. I would argue education is. Um, Actually, at the moment, all I've mentioned this point before, but all the major leaders of parties in this country, with the exception of the Labour Party and one or two others, but most of the big parties are now led by women. So I really feel this style of reporting does a lot more to divide people than to offer anything positive. I'm not saying that they should never talk about these things. I'm not saying that they should cloud them over, but you do start to wonder what is their agenda when this is all they ever report. When it comes to issues of race, the BBC will never have anything positive to say. It will always be, oh, the institutional racism. And the reason why someone who's black would find it hard to become prime minister isn't because they're black. It's because demographically there are simply far less of them. So, that's just common sense. It's the same within the acting industry, and this is something that really bugs me. Um, there are an increasing number of actors, and I hate to say it, from minority backgrounds, who are starting to play this victimhood mentality and um, saying that there is some sort of racism because, say, for example, you have a medieval production, right? I think it was David Oyelowo said that Game of Thrones should have more black actors. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not very familiar with Game of Thrones, but as I understand it, it is set in a sort of medieval Dark Age setting. Is that right? For the fans? I think it is, right? Now, the fact of the matter is, in medieval Europe, because as I understand it's that sort of setting, there were very, very, very few black people, except for the southern half in Spain, Moorish merchants and so on, but certainly not in Britain. So this is just absurd. It's absolutely saying that. I mean, if you're really arguing that every single production should have a quota of black or Chinese actors, that is utterly absurd. Utterly absurd. Um, and I also get tired of this argument that all white actors are privileged. They're not. I can think of many, many white actors who have talent, but they're always going to be in secondary roles. And many of them aren't even household names. So let's just get away from this idea that all black actors and Chinese actors are somehow discriminated against because they don't always get exactly the roles they want. I've news for you. There's white actors don't always get exactly the role they want. I'm just sick and tired of this. And with all due respect to David Oyelowo, he's a good actor. I really do believe that. I think the man's got talent, but he's in a position of privilege. So when he's kind of sending out these public messages like, "Oh, feel sorry for me because I'm black," I'm sorry, but you're paid a lot of money. You're paid to act. Stop dividing people. You're paid to be an entertainer. It's just bullshit. And people will say, "Oh, you're a white guy. What do you know about being different?" Well, I've news for you. I'm from Northern Ireland. I have actually experienced xenophobia, if I could put it that way, in this country. I suppose it's a form of racism. In fact, a few days ago, that guy who said to me, "Oh, goodbye Irish." Now, I'm not going to run to the police and say, "Oh, I've suffered a hate crime," but it was disrespectful. It was, So what I'm saying is, I'm not sitting in some sort of ivory tower where I've never ever experienced being an outsider. On many occasions in my life, I've been in a position of an outsider in some way or another, and it might be less obvious because I'm white, but all I'm saying is that if you are I think people need to just work for themselves. And if you're an ambitious person, I wish you all the best. I want a diverse parliament. I want diverse acting, all the rest of it. But I don't want it on the basis of tokenism. And in terms of acting, I don't think there should be this situation whereby tokenism is put ahead of reality. So you will never ever have a black actress playing Queen Elizabeth I. Is that racism? No, it's reality. Just like you would never have a white actor playing Martin Luther King. Well, why is that controversial? It's common sense. Within the acting industry, there are allegations of whitewashing. Now, I do understand that. I think if you have a role that is intended as an Asian character, it should be played by an Asian character. So I do understand that argument. But it works both ways. You cannot say, "Oh, this is whitewashing," and then by the same token turn around and demand, as an Asian actor, we get roles in every single production. You can't have it both ways because you can't then turn around and say that. A role that where the character is intended to be white should be played by an Asian person simply for, or a black person, simply to show that it's egalitarian. This is nonsense. It's just nonsense. If I am a director, or if I'm a producer, I should say, I'm going to look at people I feel would fit the role best. And I guess within the acting industry, there is a certain level of prejudice involved in that sense, if I could even use that word. I'm not sure if that's even the right word. But it's necessary for reality. When you're making a production, the whole point of acting is putting on a front to show something, to portray something. And if someone doesn't look like the role they're playing, it's going to backfire. I do believe that's important. So I just get tired of both CNN and the BBC constantly trying to divide people. And this is not a case that it's white people versus minority people. That's misleading because there's many minority people who absolutely agree with what I'm saying. If there is a situation, because I understand, for example, in the United States why affirmative action was necessary in the beginning because of segregation, but that is not today. There is no segregation today. So, as far as I'm concerned, let's avoid argument. Um, in today's context, if there's a situation where you really have a very disproportionate number of white men, let's say it's 99%. Now, clearly, that needs to be a little bit more reflective of society. I understand that argument. But the way to go about it is to try and encourage minority people to run for office or to, um, get interested. I just think that firstly, you can't force people to do something. So let's say there's an absence of British Chinese parliamentarians. You can't go to the Chinese community and say, "Oh, we want five of you to run as, to be MPs because we want to make up the situation to make it look more fair." You can't force people to do that. Likewise, if you have a majority of MPs who are men, could it be, and this is going to get me shot down, but could it be that possibly more men are just interested in politics marginally? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But I think these idealistic, perfect representations of society are incredibly naive because in any trade, you're not going to have an absolute equilibrium in terms of representation in any trade. So why should politics or acting be any different? I mention politics and acting because those are the two that are most kind of quoted. Um, Look, I really, really do believe in opportunity. I believe that people should be allowed to fulfill their full potential, but it shouldn't be in the context of tokenism. I mean, I wouldn't want to get a job just because I'm a white guy. If I go to, say, Tower Hamlets, which is a majority minority part of the UK, I wouldn't want to get a job because I was a minority, and I would be a minority in that area. I wouldn't want to get a role because I'm a minority. I would want to think that I got it because of my own talent, my own skill. So let me know your thoughts. This is, and the problem is if you argue against it, if you make the sort of arguments that I am making, people assume that oh, that's your white privilege. Well, I don't feel particularly privileged. I'm not rich. I'm not poor, but I'm not rich. And I'm certainly not getting anything handed to me on a plate. So it just gets tiring. And just because I'm voicing, if I was making some sort of white supremacist video where I was saying white people are better and the blacks are taking our jobs or something like this, I could totally understand the controversy. All I'm calling for is common sense. All I'm calling for is fair treatment across the board. I think it was Thomas Sowell who made the point that 60 years ago, calling for everyone to be treated equally would get you called a radical. 30 years ago, it would get you called a liberal. Today, you get called a racist. Thomas Sowell, of course, is a black man. So he has some very interesting things to say about these issues. Anyway, I think it's Thomas Sowell, Thomas Sorrell. Yeah, I've only seen a few of his videos, so I'm getting his name wrong. Apologies for that. But anyway, Yeah, so really, CNN and the BBC, yes, they can report these things, but when they're obsessing about them, that's a different matter. Just gets really tiresome.